20 minutes past 9 Central African time. Welcome back to the show. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salai Lomakwidira. And we're going to be switching gears now to very, very important conversation. Wills, something that we often put off until it's too late. But having a valid will is not only about deciding who receives your assets, it can also help protect your family, provide clarity, and I think prevent unnecessary disputes when you're not around to make some of those decisions yourself. And I think for Muslims specifically, there's also an important Sharia dimension when it comes to estate planning, including rights of heirs, outstanding debts, and just how an estate should be distributed. And as part of Wills Week 2026, we're looking at both those angles, the legal and Sharia considerations when you're preparing your will. And joining us to do so are our good friends at AlBaraka Bank. We'll be speaking to the legal advisor, Mohamed Raees Hussain, and Sharia advisor, Moulana Ibrahim. Gentlemen, salamu alaikum. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for having us this morning.
I want to jump right into it, and I think Mohamed, maybe I'll start with you from a legal perspective, and maybe start with the basics around this conversation. Why is having a professionally drafted and legally valid will so important, particularly when it comes to protecting your family, and I think most importantly for a lot of people, your assets and where they end up once you're gone?
Yeah, so that's an extremely important question, and I think what we need to understand that a will really is about certainty, control, as well as responsibility. It gives you the opportunity to decide what should happen to your estate when you are no longer there, who should administer it, as well as who should benefit, and how your family should be provided for. And without a valid will, those decisions may instead be left to the default rules of law. At the same time, a will is not just a statement of wishes, it is a legal document. And the Wills Act sets out specific formalities around how a will must be prepared, signed, as well as witnessed. And if those requirements are not properly followed, then what happens is that the validity of that will can be challenged. That is why it is so important and always advisable for you to have your will prepared by a suitably qualified person, and not simply to record what you want, but to make sure that those wishes and those expressions that you want carried forward when you are no longer there can be given legal effect to. And for Muslims, there's an added dimension of religious responsibility and preparedness, as the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has emphasized that a Muslim who has something to bequeath should not allow 2 nights to pass without having his will written and kept ready. This significance alone provides guidance that estate planning should not be treated as something to deal with only when we are older, unwell, or when circumstances force us to do so. It is a reminder, rather, to put our affairs in order while we are able to do so, to make our intentions clear, and to deal responsibly with our assets, obligations, and to avoid leaving unnecessary uncertainty for our families once we are no longer in this world.
Very, very important. And Moulana Ibrahim, I want to bring you into the conversation and maybe just, expand from a Sharia perspective why it is so important for Muslims to prepare an Islamic will and ensure that their assets are properly arranged during their lifetime.
Yes, hello, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning to all the listeners of Salam Media. Yes, so that's like my colleague has mentioned, this is a fundamental importance. I mean, from a Sharia perspective, from a legal perspective, and first and foremost, it's an Islamic world. First, it's not about the choice, it's about obedience, meaning obedience to the Creator, Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your wealth is an amana from Allah. The shares are stipulated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So for a Muslim, ensuring your estate evolves according to Sharia is rather a religious obligation, not a lifestyle choice. So in a country like South Africa, where Islamic law is not the law of the land, a written Islamic will is the only way to make that obligation take full effect, and to rest assured that the day you leave this world. And one thing that's guaranteed is we all have to leave. We'll all have to pass away, and we'll have to leave this world. And the choice is ours, that if we act proactively now while we are alive to make sure that our once we leave this world, obviously we cannot do anything that is already everything is closed. So we need to make sure that we take our time now. And we got our World's Week coming up 14th to the 18th of September, wherein free world drafting by attorneys would be offered nationwide. AlBaraka, also Sharia compliant Islamic world, is free of charge, available at the website or at the branch.
Mm,
So and everything we own is given to us in trust, meaning amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are just merely the custodians of that. So it's very important that you arrange it correctly, because this is the obligation and commands directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran.
And that's very, very important to note. I want to stay with you, Moulana, because usually there's a misconception that writing an Islamic will simply means choosing who you want your assets to go to. But what does Sharia actually say about the distribution of an estate, and how ultimately what you have once you're gone ends up to?
Yeah, so the Quran beautifully stipulates the shares. If you look at chapter 4, Surah Nisa, famously known as the ayat Yusikumullah fi awladikum, wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions thulus, sudus, and rubu'. All of these are shares, are fractions, and it's very important that these are stipulated that how much each heir should get.
Mm,
So these are something that obviously is extremely rigid. There's no leeway in it. But from an Islamic perspective, there's an order that we follow. So first, obviously, once someone passes away from the estate, you are allowed to take the burial and funeral expenses. And that's the first charge on the estate, right? Number two is you settle all the debts. So meaning any obligations or loan accounts or any other account that you have to settle, whether it be private or with the entity, you need the estate, the money should come out of the estate, ideally. Number three is then you execute the bequest, meaning now this is the interesting part, is a wasiya. This is where Sharia gives you the legal right to
mm,
to to delegate, but this can only be a maximum of one third. So the listeners need to be bear in mind that this is only to non-heirs, and this year includes your fidya, meaning your compensation for your must fast or salah, and that's very important because as we know, there's people that have a lot of must fast or salahs, and this year needs to be settled as a fundamental from the bequest and the wasiya. So we're not allowed to have one in excess of one third. So
mm,
that's an important part, and sometimes that's what we need to explain, and that's why it's very important also that you consult with the correct individuals, meaning like for example, at AlBaraka Bank, we got legal advisors, we got Sharia advisors as well, to try and assist you as much as possible. Also, our consultants are trained as well to explain to you these specifics, and you can also ask your questions, etc. And then number four is to distribute the remainder to the heirs. So meaning this year is by the fixed Quranic shares.
mm,
So that's basically a Islamic estate, and the important part there also, I don't know if you want to touch on it now, is that the nomination of an executor. So the executor must be obviously able to execute according to Sharia, according to the law of the land, and to make sure that the executor that you select is someone that is obviously going to act in your best interest had you been alive. Because you must know, you know more around, you can't make any decisions or
mm,
pull back that right. So you need to make sure that you got the executor, and also a standby executor in the instance wherein your primary executor maybe predecessors you, is maybe unable to act on the solution of the estate. Then you need to have primary, secondary, and so forth. So these are
mm.
important aspects really, and I'm glad that we get the time today to discuss this with you and to try and shed some light on it from a Sharia and a legal perspective as well.
Very, very important. I want us to take a quick break. When we come back, I think we'll expand a bit further on this conversation because it's very, very important. When you look at how people can, preserve their legacies, and I think most importantly, do it in a Sharia compliant way. But we'll go to the markets and then we'll return after this.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic Sharia and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
When disaster strikes, families lose everything in an instant. Homes destroyed, communities displaced. Hope fades into uncertainty. Our Global Emergency Fund ensures we respond without delay, delivering food, water, shelter, and healthcare to families in need. To support our Global Emergency Fund, visit islamicrelief.org.za.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Hey, Gulam.
Yeah?
Did I return your lawnmower last month?
No, bye, you didn't.
Oh, no. Now what'll I do? I wanted to borrow it again, man.
With Randry Jewelers, you won't have to borrow or lend because the prices are so well trimmed on all gold and diamond jewelry. Alternatively, we could remake your old jewelry into a brilliant new design. Visit Randry Jewelers at 151 Stevens Lamini Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randry Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era. Salam Media, humanitarian journalism.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us once again. I just tuned into News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiyere, and I'm in conversation with Mohamed Raees Hussain. He's an admitted attorney, currently serving as a legal advisor at AlBaraka Bank. And we also have Moulana Ibrahim, who's joining us as a Shariah advisor at AlBaraka Bank also. And we're having a really interesting and I think important conversation around wills. It's Wills Week 2026. So you'll be hearing more and more conversations around wills, how you can curate your will and how you can make it more Sharia compliant. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for staying with us. I want to come back to the legal aspect of things. And I think, Brother Mohamed, this is where I would like you to come in. When it comes to, the legal and practical consequences of unfortunately passing away without a valid will, what happens after that? What happens when someone dies without a valid will? And there's a new phrase or term that I learned, which is interstate succession. What is that? And then what does it mean for the family that is unfortunately left behind after someone is departed?
Yeah, so I think an important aspect that we often overlook is, the fact that without a will, what then determines how our assets and basically our estate then is distributed to our heirs. And that basically is where the term interstate succession comes in. So basically passing away without a will means that you have to die interstate. And obviously, there are specific laws within South Africa, namely through the Interstate Succession Act, that determine who inherits and in what proportions they inherit. And also, an important fact I think Moulana mentioned previously is you lose that ability to choose who you would want to be the executor of your estate and then ultimately attend to that administration process. That then needs to be undertaken through a formal nomination process. And obviously, it needs to then be one of the direct heirs of the deceased. If not, then there is a requirement that whoever is nominated, if it is a third party, then they obviously need to put up a bond of security to the value of the estate. Also, something that is often overlooked, and obviously it has significant cost implications in that somebody outside of the family is nominated as the executor at that reporting stage, then there is a cost implication in order to take on that appointment through the master's office. Yeah, and also this is particularly important because and we live in a country that is not an Islamic country, so the Islamic inheritance laws are not automatically implemented. And without a valid will, you then lose that ability to say, fine, implementing my will, but at the same time, whilst it is within the constraints of the laws and regulations of South Africa, which allows you to ultimately implement the Sharia compliant wills, obviously giving heed to the formalities required. And then obviously you lose that ability if you don't implement a will. So you ultimately have that ability whilst you're alive to implement a Sharia compliant will, thereby allowing your assets and your estate to be distributed in terms of Islamic inheritance laws. But again, failure to do so then means that you're leaving your family in a bit of a predicament because obviously the laws of South Africa would apply, which are obviously contrary to Islamic inheritance laws. That's why planning during one's lifetime is so important. And a properly drafted Islamic will helps bridge South African legal requirements with the intended Sharia distribution of the estate. And I think it's not just simply about expressing a preference, it is about making sure that your wishes, but more importantly, your religious obligations are capable of being implemented in a legally effective way. And yeah, if you don't make these decisions during your lifetime, unfortunately, the law will make it for you. And again, I'd like to stress the fact as Muslims in South Africa, we have the legal ability to put a Sharia compliant will in place. So I think we should take that responsibility upon ourselves and ensure that once you reach the age that you are able to implement a will, which is 16 years of age, then you should ideally, sign a will and keep it in place. Because life is unpredictable, and I think the only thing in life that is guaranteed is death itself. So I think the important takeaway from that is, always be in a state of preparedness because there is a lot of uncertainty in life. And again, you cannot predict when it is your time to pass away. So I think it's of vital importance that we take all of the necessary measures to implement the requirements necessary for us before we leave this world.
I want to stay with you, Mohamed, because I think being prepared is very, very important. But I think being prepared the right way is also as equally as important. What would you say are some of the key considerations people should be making when it comes to preparing their wills correctly? Because you can prepare a will, but if it's not correctly done, then it can be null. It could be void and not have the right impact that you wanted to have. So regarding some of the key things like beneficiaries, like guardianship of minor children, the appointment of an executor, what are some of those that need to be looked at quite carefully, and what are some of the recommendations you can make in that regard, to make sure that a will is in place, but it's also I think a correct will that should serve its intended purpose?
I think this is also again going to sound a bit repetitive, but an important question. I think a lot of the questions that come out during this time of National Wills Week is of utmost importance to everyone to pay heed to. Uh, and like I mentioned earlier, the Wills Act does stipulate requirements in order for your will to be valid. It needs to be in writing. It needs to be signed by the person making the will, as well as two competent witnesses. But apart from putting in place a valid will, there are other considerations that you need to take into account when you do that or when you review your will. And I think one of the most important aspects is obviously who you appoint as your executor. As Moulana mentioned a little while ago, this person will be responsible for taking your estate through the entire administration process. So ideally, you want someone in this position that has the requisite knowledge, experience, as well as capacity to do that task properly. And it's also sensible to nominate a backup executor in the event that your primary nominated executor predeceases you or is unable to act. And I think this is where it's important, especially from an AlBaraka point of view, because nominating an entity like AlBaraka Bank allows you to avoid that uncertainty in that AlBaraka Bank will not predecease you like a normal person. So there's continuity in the executor, which means that you don't worry about that aspect of your will. And secondly, another important aspect is obviously if you do have minor children. I think we overlook what considerations need to be taken into account when we do have minor children, because obviously what happens to their care and financial protection needs to be clear within that will and your directions. And that obviously means thinking carefully about who should act as their guardian and how any inheritance that may be due to them is held and then managed. And then these decisions are much better done whilst you're alive and have the capacity to do so than to be determined once you have already passed away. So if you pass away without making those determinations within your will, what happens is that any inheritance which may be due to them, that then gets held in the guardian's fund, which is a government managed fund. And obviously then getting access to those funds is extremely difficult in need of the minor child. So it's entirely important to take those considerations and implement it within your will, especially where there's minor children involved. And another major aspect that one should consider is obviously, when you pass away, how does someone then determine what assets you have? Because you may not have told your family about a property that you recently purchased or purchased a while ago. So I think it's important to keep an up-to-date schedule of your assets and liabilities. And this ensures that when you pass away, your executor, although it may not be the most recent schedule, but at that point in time has an idea of what assets and liabilities you may have had, and obviously then allows them to interrogate that further to ultimately determine what assets and liabilities you had at the time of your passing. And also an important and practical issue is that of liquidity. Because I think often what we don't realize is that once we pass away, our bank accounts may be restricted. So then what happens in terms of cash flow for day-to-day expenses for our family? So that is an extremely important point that I think every person that's implementing a will should ensure. It's not going to be done through your will, but obviously it's something that needs to be done in line with it, and just keeping enough cash aside for at least the first few months after you pass away, so that those expenses can be catered for, is of utmost importance. And obviously, by doing so, you then ensuring that you may not be there at that time, but your family is at least then taken care of within those immediate months after your passing, which is an extremely difficult time for them, without having to then worry about, how do we now pay for day-to-day expenses? How do we pay our electricity bill at the end of the month? And things like that. So I think it's extremely important to ensure that we cater for liquidity once we have passed away. And then on the aspect of beneficiaries, for Muslims, this is obviously determined once you pass away. So when you put in place an Islamic will, there's no need to then determine who your beneficiaries are. These are then done once you pass away in line with the predetermined proportions that each beneficiary will inherit. But what we should rather do is, if we want to, we can, and as Moulana has mentioned, implement a wasiya up to a maximum of 1/3 for the benefit of non-heirs or charities, which will obviously then benefit the deceased once they have passed away and left this world as well. So I think these are important considerations that we should all take into account. And again, without these small steps being taken, there are drastic consequences once you have passed away, which you can unfortunately not then remedy, and it is left upon your family to fix. And again, it is why it's so important to ensure that you have properly executed will together with proper instructions and details for your family for a time when you are no longer there to provide them with those instructions and how to take things forward. So yeah, those are the main considerations. And yeah, I think it's important that we all implement these considerations in implementing our will.
Before we close, I'm just going to take, I think there are a few questions from our listeners on our WhatsApp line, but I'll just take one. Maybe Mohamed, if you can answer it as quickly and as briefly as possible. There's Anonymous who sent us a message and they're saying, my uncle was employed by the South African National Defence Force and had a valid will before he passed away. And in his will, he named me and his mother, my grandmother, as beneficiaries together with his 2 children. When I tried to claim my benefit, I was informed that I'm over the age of 21 and therefore do not qualify. I was also told that a new government gazette gives preference to the deceased's children. What legal recourse do I have in this situation? Does the deceased will still carry legal weight and represent their final wishes, or can legislation or a government gazette override the provisions of a valid will? How would you respond to that one? Mohamed, did you get my question? All right. I don't think Mohamed got that one, but I think if anyone else has any queries, they can just send them to us, and then we'll refer them to AlBaraka Bank. Moulana, maybe I should wrap up with you. If you can still hear me, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. From just an Islamic perspective, and this is in closing. What matters should a Muslim, I think most importantly, consider when preparing for death from a Sharia perspective? This includes things like debt, things like outstanding obligations, bequests, and just generally the right of heirs.
Yeah, so that sums it up like we mentioned previously, and we're going to stress on the same points like my colleague has spoken as well, is that first and foremost, whatever we born into this world, we came with nothing, and the reality is we're all going to be living with nothing as well. So when you leave, so Islamic law stipulates the shares, that's for the heirs. But like I mentioned previously, and I just touched on it, the act of maybe salah and fasting, and it's very important that we try and fulfill these obligations in our lifetime, so wherein we still have the opportunity to repay this, and we make it easier should we then pass away and leave this world. Then we have less to account for in terms of that hopefully that the Almighty will forgive us and look at it that we recompense it in our lifetime. And another aspect that's very, very crucial and important is that we don't usurp anybody's right. So sometimes we find some issue, or maybe there was a family dispute or some sort, and then we feel like we want to tend to give somebody more than what was stipulated for them, meaning a rightful heir. That is incorrect and not permissible according to Sharia. So the heirs have their amount or their fraction that they're going to receive, and this is set already. Obviously, you can give gifts in your lifetime, and there's nothing stopping you from gifting anybody or providing one of your heirs with more things than another while you're alive. But Islam wants you to always be fair and equality, and all of these aspects need to be taken up. One of the main things is also, like I mentioned, not diverting assets through nominations, meaning naming beneficiaries on life policies, the kaful, retirement or provident funds. So the asset bypasses the estate and the natural inheritors altogether. This is a very common and overlooked trap that we find in our experience, that some people, they tend to overlook this and they feel that it's fine to do that. Yes, it is, but you shouldn't bypass anybody's right or that has been given to them. And then another aspect is, obviously, you must update your will from time to time. I mean, if there's major circumstances in your life, or or your assets have been changed, or drastically your situation has changed, then it's always good to look and revisit your will, and don't just leave it there and then just feel maybe in 20, 30 years time your situation, or I don't know, the Almighty knows best how long each person is going to be living. And that's why you find the narration of our beloved Prophet Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions that the Laylatain or Laylatan, and then this year is like you shouldn't be spending 2 nights fast without a valid will. So this is an act of taqwa and piety and accountability. And preparing your estate is part of your religious obligations and your worldly obligations as well. So whether you a Muslim or non-Muslim, everybody has to leave the world, and everybody has to. But Muslims have to subscribe to the Sharia and the laws of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and what has been tested and revealed to us in the Quran. So my advice in closing would be that your wealth is an amana. Make sure that you're using it correctly, and make sure that even when you're going to leave this world, everything is clearly documented. And really, Islamic law prefers the situation where everything is left in writing and there's no ambiguity, or there's no further need for investigations, or this one was untruthful, or whatever it may be. Islam always wants to promote transparency, equality, and fairness. And so this World's Week, don't postpone it. I think proper Islamic world, as we covered in this online today, is that it's something that is not negotiable. It's something that we all have to do, and a well protects your family. It honors your faith, and it's even a rewarding aspect in terms of you'll get reward for everything, or every time that you spend, or every money or amount that you have to spend to plan your estate effectively and according to Sharia. So AlBaraka Bank is offering Sharia compliant world, and many of the attorneys would be offering promotions. I mean, what the National World Week coming 14th to the 18th September. So my advice to one and all is to try and get our affairs in. You don't also have to wait for World's Week. You can do it at, I mean, any time, and the sooner the better. And we all tend to procrastinate or delay, thinking, no, I'll do it at such and such time. But to be honest with you, no one can guarantee, and that's why I quoted the word of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, something to this effect: "Laylatayni illa wasiyatu maktubah," so that there shouldn't be 2 nights pass without his will written. So that shows that even 2 nights is a long enough time. So I think that emphasizes it quite nicely, to say that let's get it going. Let's engage with the proper expertise, meaning legally as well as from the Sharia side. And AlBaraka Bank, alhamdulillah, we do have that, and there's many other scholars also in our local communities that we can refer to or take advice from as well.
There we have it. Moulana, Jazakallah so much for that. I think that's where we're going to leave the conversation, gentlemen. Mohamed, Raees, Hussain, legal advisor at AlBaraka Bank, and Moulana Ibrahim, Shariah advisor at AlBaraka Bank, joining us this morning for the launch of Wales Week 2026. Jazakallah so much. Really appreciate it.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
There we have it. If you want a bit more information on how AlBaraka Bank can assist you, you can visit their website, albarakabank.co.za, and I think you can also visit their social media pages. Otherwise, give them a call on 086 022 5786. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with you after this.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate.